Hello, everybody, and welcome to Ministry Mondays with Meg. I'm Meg. Um, I'm Reverend Meg Biddle, and I serve as the National Coordinator of Ministry Life and the American Baptist Personnel Services. And today I have as my guest, I have the honor of having Tony Gapastione with me, who has agreed to let me ask a bunch of questions. Actually, I'm gonna do a lot of listening. But Tony, would you just introduce yourself and tell everybody those who may not know you, a little bit about you, what you do?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I love the American Baptist Home Mission Society. They've been so supportive, and I love that I'm a part of you all in some way. So it's cool. So, yes, my name is Tony Gapastione. My pronouns are he, him, his. In my work, I've also been learning to do a physical description in case anyone, for whatever reason, cannot see me. I'm a Caucasian man, and I have I have black shirt on with some glasses and brown hair, and I'm sitting in my BraveMaker studio that has some cool pink light going on. I am in Redwood City, California, which is Northern California, about 30 minutes south of San Francisco, and I founded and executive direct BraveMaker, which is a nonprofit film and arts organization that's dedicated to justice, diversity, and inclusion. So we really care about education and entertainment and community experiences around the arts.
That was perfect. That was better than any introduction I could do. I love that you do that, like that you describe yourself, what you're wearing, and your environment. Um,
Mhm.
so let me just ask that first, because that's
Yeah.
really interesting. What caused you to start that?
I am learning. I started BraveMaker in 2018. Half I say because I wanted to tell stories. I wanted to be a filmmaker and use the arts as a way to impact culture. But I also started it because I knew I was ignorant to so many social justice issues. I was just so unaware of the challenges of so many marginalized people. And in doing this work and then this show, we have come across, the deaf community and recognizing, gosh, like we need to get better at having captions. We've come across, the blind community, that people that have, all these different challenges or in some way disabilities that we have to get better at finding ways to be inclusive. So the physical description, is one for people who can't see, right? So if they can hear what's going on, we can create a little bit more of a connection and include them in the conversation with this is what the background looks like, this is what I'm wearing, this is my ethnicity, this is how I present myself, pronouns, etc. And so I'm learning, and sometimes it takes a little bit of extra time to get going, but if it helps more people feel welcomed to the table and to the conversation, then it's worth it. Oh, you're muted. You're muted, Meg.
See, I think it's a wonderful explanation and reasoning, for doing this. Um, I mean, I was thinking, my son is autistic.
Mm,
So, sitting in a pew at church,
right.
it would have to always be the same pew, always in the back, and he's very particular and didn't stand up when everybody else did, but how much we do just, I mean, how much that just changes everything just by describing simply where you are located,
Mhm.
what you look like for somebody. I really think that's beautiful.
Thank
Um,
you. And I can't take credit for it, right? Somebody else passed on to me, but I think we have a lot to learn. And I
right.
know a lot of your audience in the American Baptist Home Mission, community, they are involved with churches. My background, I was a pastor full time vocationally for 20 years with one specific local congregation. And then I left to start BraveMaker in 2018, but I went back in 2019 to a small church here in Northern California that is loosely connected to the American Baptist Home Mission Society, which is cool. That's how I met Lauren Ng and got connected to the co-creators incubator, which is how I'm connected, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But I I have just been so convicted about how much we as the church, as people of faith, could do better, right? Could be more welcoming to people of all abilities. And the way that sometimes we center around a particular narrative and or person and or way of doing our worship gatherings, just that idea, even for any child, that the idea that be quiet, right? There's even a sign. I consult a lot of churches, and one of the churches I've had a long-term relationship with, I'm trying to address this, but there's a sign literally that says shh, children, shh, in the main door of the worship, area. And I just think like that sends such a loud message, right, about who is welcome here. And I've been a part of churches that will say things, and I have adopted this in my own preaching with my church. Hey, we welcome kids, we welcome breastfeeding mothers. If you have to make a sound, if you have to get up, if you are more comfortable moving, do it. Because this is not about you being so quiet so you hear every single word that comes out of my mouth, but we need to find ways to worship God together, explore God together in the same space. And that means if your kids need to be playing with Play-Doh or coloring or making sounds on an iPad, do it, and that's an adjustment. And if we don't,
Right.
then if we don't evolve, we die,
Right. But that noise that kids bring and all of that
Mm-hmm.
that says we're alive, you know.
I was just gonna, yeah, yes, you're totally right. That's life.
That's what says that we are alive.
Yeah.
Um so you went from being a pastor for 20 years to
Mm-hmm.
2018 is when you started this. So it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't you felt so broken by the church and all it wasn't one of those kind of stories, right? It was
Well, there's a little brokenness, yes, but
I
not
mean,
so much that I felt tainted in such a way that my faith crumbled. Maybe my faith was just reconstructing, and my
right.
idea of the church was remolding. But yeah.
And so as was filmmaking, was that or do you consider this more filmmaking or is it more you talk a lot about storytelling, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's how you
Mm-hmm.
preface this?
Good clarifying question. I probably use them interchangeably, and
Okay.
I believe, I'm still a pastor in the sense of, because I remember when I first left, people would say things like, I can't imagine you're not going to be a pastor anymore. You're leaving the pastorate. And I would feel a little bit, ooh, that hurts. And then I recognize, oh, I'm not really leaving. I'm not denying my call to be a pastor. I'm just going to be a pastor in a different way. And I really felt the call to the storytelling spaces and the creative arts and film specifically as my ministry, which is why I got so excited when the Co-Creators Incubator came into my world. And it was this alternative entrepreneurship idea that Mission Society was wanting to invest in. I thought that's what I wanted my church to do, because I felt for so long, and I'm a person in a majority space in the culture. I don't often, I'm not marginalized in my identities and all the different things. So I have a lot of privilege, and I totally recognize that. And at the same time, there was some of these messages that I received subtly and not so subtly, that my passion for the arts, or even, you know, Hollywood, it's not, it doesn't honor God, right? These places, these things, these ambitions are not the way of Jesus. So how do you utilize, you get these messages. So then what do you do when you have this desire to create, to write, to perform? It feels like, oh, I guess I'm just a narcissist, or I guess I just don't care about God as much as maybe I thought I do. So maybe let me really focus on being a preacher, because that's how I will really honor God. And then I felt all that stuff sort of strip away. It took a long time, but I thought, oh, I just was given the wrong messages and I chose to believe them. And now I'm at the place where, no, this is my calling from God, and anybody can follow Jesus and serve and partner with God in anything and everything they do. Nothing should limit us.
And I think as people who understand calling, you know, you understand that the calling there's the call within the call that
Yeah.
changes as we change
Yeah.
and evolve. By the grace of God, I'm not the same person that I
Mm-hmm.
was, 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that is that is only by the grace of God. And um and I love that you just live into it. This is what I feel like God is where God is calling me now, and no, I haven't abandoned God and what I believe and what I love. I'm just living into it a very different way, which is, how I feel about ministry myself. Um,
Hmm.
so when you started BraveMaker, was it all through co-creator? Did you already have the idea, just kind of looking for the way to make that happen? How did this all come together?
Yeah. So the idea of BraveMaker came toward the end of 2017 when I was feeling as if it was time for me to go to resign from my church, and I started getting those things in motion. And my wife and I, we have 3 children. We lived in church-owned housing. We live in a very expensive market, rental market in the San Francisco Bay. So it was, what are we gonna do? And I had always wanted to do film and acting and the performing arts. And I thought, okay, so I know people of faith are generous. I know I'm using air quotes here, but the
Mhm.
nonprofit world in which churches do, I've lived by the generosity of other people giving, right? My salary was because people gave and tithed and however you want to communicate that. So I thought, well, I know that system. I know that way, that business model, if you will. So I thought I can create a nonprofit. I was inspired by organizations like the Sundance Film Institute. And I thought I'll create this and really kind of launch into it. So 2018, I got all my paperwork, and all that kind of stuff going on, and basically began the foundation of it. Well, I was also doing some speaking with some churches, and I was speaking in Novato, California with this church called The Quest, and Lauren Ng happened to be attending as a visitor this one day as I was talking about this calling that I felt from God to go out and take a risk in this adventure. And she came up to me and she said, you might be a good candidate to apply for this grant program, this kind of cohort fellowship idea. I said, cool, send it to me. And so I think it came toward the end of 2018 where I applied. And then in the beginning of 2019, I want to say like the first month, I received, the invitation to attend and be a part of this. And so I was one of 6 people in the first iteration, the first cohort of co-creators. And it was great. You give a little seed money grant, and then you get some mentoring, and you're a part of these really cool opportunities where I got to fly to Philadelphia, King of Prussia at the Lamb headquarters there, which is that where you are today, Meg?
It is. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's where I
awesome.
work out of. Yeah.
That's great. So I just had such a good time being a recipient of a lot of love and care and concern. So I had already had a good amount of work done, but I still was looking to make those partnerships and networking and links, and that happened during that time.
Okay. Okay. Um, why did you go 501c3? I mean, why did you,
Mhm.
and for those who don't know what 501c3 is, I guess, nonprofit, does that
Yeah,
allow you more control, or what was your thought
yeah.
process behind that?
Because that's all I really knew, and I still am growing as a business leader. I'm still trying to figure out what does it mean to. I'm running a business, right? So I really just banked on this, the fact that I knew how to win. Sounds so like that language of church. Win people over. I knew how
Yeah.
to tell a story in such a way that they could see the impact of their financial giving. That being charitable has an impact on culture and society. Because I've done that so long with the church. Like people, we have grasped these principles, from scripture, from our faith tradition about giving back the things that God gives to us. And I knew I could leverage that. I could tell people, which to be honest, I probably was way, way more naive because
Mm.
I failed a lot, or yeah, let's just say I failed because I didn't really catalyze the church to give to this endeavor because it was a little more outside the box than people were comfortable with. A lot of the giving I got came from more riskier, progressive people who saw this as an entrepreneurship in the name of Jesus and not necessarily churches. In fact, I got a lot of doors shut to me because some people felt some of the work was not what they wanted to give to. And so I was kind of devastated early on. BraveMaker started with this idea too of doing community experiences through film screenings and panel discussions. And some of the films and guests I was inviting were talking about difficult things like racial justice, gender equity, LGBT rights. suicide prevention, mental health, and that could be often uncomfortable. And one particular film was about a church and its wrestling with sexual orientation and gender identity. And the church basically said they couldn't support that and they didn't want to be a part of it. So when it comes back to why I went to a 501c3, you know, in some way, I'm kind of glad that I was so naive in believing that the church would kind of rally behind it. It's ended up benefiting, you know, for 4 years, I've been able to survive, not quite thrive yet. We're getting there. Being able to have, you know, a place to rent, this little studio here where we're getting more space. And then more churches are slowly, especially after the pandemic, coming out, recognizing they need to partner with organizations that are stepping out in faith and having hard conversations. Like this Friday, I'm hosting a show, a live performance for one of my friends called Born Again in Berkeley. And it's about a white, straight woman's journey with recognizing her ignorance in regards to being a part of a church that was not very gracious toward LGBT people, and how, you know, it took her a couple decades to figure that out. And I've been inviting churches, and there's still churches that are a little hesitant to attend because it is risky. It does sometimes make us feel uncomfortable, but sometimes I think that's the best way we grow is, you know, being disturbed and interrupted in what we always do in order to see something new, like, right, having ears to hear and eyes to see. So it's been a long journey, but 501c3 has benefited for us in that way.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about what you're talking about, the lady and her journey there. I mean, I'm from the Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm from Indiana, a red state, a very, you know, red state. And when I say by the grace of God, I'm not the same person. I mean, those are the things that had to, you know, come apart for myself.
Sure.
That God had to do within me to go, you know, okay, this is where you were, and we're grateful for that. But there's more to it than this.
Yeah.
You know, and for me now, all is all. You know, there is not an exception. So I think it's beautiful that justice work that you're doing there. Is that what the majority of your films center around? Is justice and equality issues?
I think the word justice is, you know, multi-layered, and okay. I hope that justice encompasses just making the world right for all. That's really how I look at it. Is how do we tell stories that make it right for all, that every single person feels they're getting their needs met, whether they have a disability or not, whether they're a woman or not, whether they're a person of color or not, that, you know, the mental health conversation, just even, you know, gender parity in the workplace, whether you're a business person or an actor or someone on a church staff, you know, conversations around these things. If people are being paid different, but they're doing the same work, that's an injustice. So I like that word a lot. I know sometimes it kind of just can be boxed into one thing, and we're still trying to kind of figure out how do we communicate what we do. So we've sort of landed on this idea that we do education, entertainment, and community experiences, and they're all girded with this hope to elevate justice, diversity, and inclusion.
So when you share your story, you're presenting to a group, do you talk about BraveMaker? Do you frame it as a ministry? Is that or that business model, or both?
Yeah. I think you can be all things to all people sometimes, you know, as Paul would talk about. That depends on who I'm talking, right? So to a church, I really would say this is my ministry. Now, some people would hear ministry and they would think Harry Potter, or they would think some sort of a, you know, British parliament type thing, who aren't people of faith. So I'm just really, you know, I think specific, strategic with how I frame BraveMaker, depending on who the audience is. So this Friday night, we're hosting this event in a church building, but we will have, I think, hopefully people of faith as well as people who aren't maybe connected to a specific congregation. And we're going to host a conversation after the live performance. And I try to talk about this kind of nuanced way of how BraveMaker exists. It's not a Christian organization, again, air quotes. I happen to be a Christ follower, but a lot of my team are not, and that's okay. We have people who are Muslim, who are involved in the team. We have Jewish people, so that's an important part too. Is we're collaborating in conversation together with people of different faiths and backgrounds, and I think it's exciting. And again, if someone's like, well, I'm not going to support it unless you're doing an altar call or unless there's scripture read, then I go, we're probably not a right fit for you. And that's okay. I don't mind that. I know where we're going, and it's okay if that person wants to, separate or not support. I've definitely had that happen in the past, and that's okay.
And that's a great place to come to, isn't it? Where you're just not, I'm so desperate, or I am just that I have to. I mean, a
Right.
lot of times at the church, especially like the small churches, where you have people
Yeah.
hold the church hostage because of the money in the offering plate. Well, I'm the biggest giver, so you have to keep me. Um, so I think it's really speaks well of you and your organization that you've come to that place where you're like, you know what, that's okay if you aren't okay with who we are. Um, and I think the answer to the question that I was looking for is the one that you answered, where you said, yes, you are a Christ follower, but
Yeah.
no, we are not, a Christian
Yeah.
organization. So I think that's very important. I think that there's plenty of room
Mm-hmm.
for all of us at the
All of
table.
them. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of
Um,
people, when we talk about filmmaking too, will say, are you a Christian filmmaker? And I usually know what they mean by that, but then I'll say, well, what do you mean when you ask me that question? What does a Christian filmmaker look like, or what does a Christian filmmaker do? And then they'll reference, well, makes these kind of films, and they might bring up a title that we all would recognize as something that was really made for a church audience. I want the church to be a part and to be an audience in the work I'm doing, but I'm not just making things for churches. I'm making things for anybody and everybody who wants to ask questions about faith, or who wants to learn more about the injustices of the world, or who's willing to step into a place. Like we did a whole thing this summer where we addressed sexual assault in the athletic industry with a person's short film that was done through BraveMaker by a filmmaker who really survived sexual assault. And that's not an easy topic to talk about, but we carved out an hour and a half. We showed the film. We did a panel discussion, and it felt to me like this felt like a church service, although maybe Jesus, we didn't pray or anything like that, but there was these moments where you just felt that was palpable and it was transcendent. And I would say I am a Christian who's a filmmaker, but not all of my films are going to be appropriate potentially, or sought after by the church audience, because they don't always, make you feel like you're supposed to feel on a Sunday morning. And maybe that's also an indictment too of what we've created on a Sunday morning, is this expectation that come happy, put the smile on, and let's just feel good. Nothing against feeling good, but I think sometimes I want to lament, and I want to come and say, I'm not in a great place, and that's okay. And that's why in our own church service, we make space for silence, and we give people permission to do whatever they need to do to meet with God. And so I always think like that. That's what I'm doing, and that's what's in my head as a BraveMaker filmmaker and the founder of this organization. Is I just want to create space for people to find what they need, whether it's entertainment or education, comfort, healing, and it could all happen through conversations and through the stories of film.
So, how many projects do you have going now? Do you say, okay, this is what we can handle, or I mean, how does this, or oh my gosh, we're like brand new, we've just got to go, kind of thing.
Very much. That analogy of launching the rocket into space and you're putting it together while it's in the air. It very much feels like we ignited and we're launching. We're trying to figure it out as we go. We do have multiple projects happening all at the same time. Because film in whether it's animated or documentary or short or long, whatever. Like these things take so much time and so much collaboration. So I don't know, people who watch the the Comic-Con reports or Disney, they might be familiar with this idea that they'll show a huge timeline of what the next 5 to 10 years look like, and they'll have these 5 shows are coming out, these 7 movies, da da da. I try to model that and emulate that in a way that we're going, okay, we know in the next 5 years we have 5 different feature films, which means like a full-length film that we're trying to do. And then we're trying to host a annual film fest for 4 days every summer. And we're trying to do a short film every few months. And we're trying to hold these classes and launch these new community experiences where, now that we're coming out safer in the middle of pandemic, where we can do in-person classes, which we haven't done since, early 2020, we're trying to say, well, what can we do here at our space? And then what do we do on Zoom? So we are juggling a lot, and I'm trying to find the balance. As a nonprofit, we're always dependent on the resources that we have. And I think we do a lot with a little, but if I could get more funding, we could do more. So, and I work other jobs too, to support my family and my kids. So, everything is in balance.
I do want to make sure that I make that little plug for BraveMaker.com for those who are watching and want to go support Tony and BraveMaker and the great work that they're doing. We certainly want to say yes, absolutely. Please go support them. BraveMaker.
I appreciate that. Yeah, we have 25 people, which is not a lot. 25 people every month give. Our lowest giver is a $10, and then I think we have one person who gives $500 every month, and that helps us with everything, with our rent and our gear that we need. And then when we get a nice little nest egg, we can make some films, and I can hire people for our events, and that is such a gift. 25 people every month. It's kind of like a church too. Like you can become a monthly donor, and all those donors then get free access to our events and special perks and stuff.
So as you've become this entrepreneur now, like how's your leadership like evolved since the beginning of BraveMaker in 2018 to where you are now?
A lot has happened. I love being an entrepreneur, and I've really kind of embraced that word and owned it. And I hope the church embraces it a lot more. So I talk about that idea that churches can, and I don't like to use should a lot, but could embrace this in such a way that it becomes really influential in who you are as a people. So as a leader of a nonprofit and who's an entrepreneur myself, part of my leadership now has become elevating this idea to others, to say, if you want to impact your community, support entrepreneurs. Like our church is trying to host small business leaders, for cheaper rent. We've built an office space that can be rentable in our building, because we see that as a way to extend our ministry to the community. So that's one thing I get really excited about, is trying to do more, experiment more. But as an individual, what I'm noticing in my life is learning how to say no, learning how to find the right people, hire the right people. It's been a challenge. I have this pastor shepherd heart that I will give people second, third, fourth chances. And I often tell people, that's my BraveMaker hat. I put the BraveMaker hat on, and I will do whatever I can to help someone who's emerging or aspiring. And at the same time, I have to take that BraveMaker hat off at times, and I say, now I'm going to put my Hollywood hat on and say, if you really want to be competitive as a whatever director, as a producer, as an editor, you have to work hard. You have to recognize that there are 50 more people who are waiting to get into your position and not showing up on time or not delivering upon the things you committed to do. That has consequences. So it's hard, but I think the church could get better at that too, is hiring people well. They say, like, be slow to hire and quick to fire. That's one learning lesson as an entrepreneur that's been really hard for me, because I want to be so graceful and give people second chance, but that doesn't benefit them. It doesn't benefit our organization and our strategy to create change in culture if I'm allowing people to not fulfill their duties, So it's been tough, but learning to hire and fire well has been a big thing in my leadership that I've learned.
So would you say that's been like your biggest um, lesson you learned, is that learn to hire and fire well?
Yep, and that comes with good communication, like being very clear. Like when I hire someone, this is your job description. This is what I've asked you to do. This is the timeline it's on. And it sounds very like, wow, that sounds like very business. But I have had people come to some of my meetings. I'm just really like, ooh, like like chill, laissez-faire, like just have people go around the room and introduce yourself. And then you've got a half an hour meeting where then all of a sudden everyone's done talking and going on tangents and you have 10 minutes to get something done. And I had one of my potential board members who I'm courting right now. She came to one of the meetings and she's like, oh gosh, you could totally increase your results, your ROI, return on investment, if you were to set an agenda, give time limits, be really clear about what you expect from people, make sure that every week they are reporting on what they said they were going to do and who's going to follow up. And it just revolutionized how I do meetings. Like I used to be in the church and we'd have an hour and a half, 2 hour meetings and you're like slogged, you're so tired, they're kind of boring. And you go, what did we accomplish? And you go back the next week and it's the same thing. So I am like the master of the 30-minute meeting now. I love it. And I think you can get so much done with a short amount of time and people feel freer when they know clearly what they're supposed to do. So communication, making sure everyone's on the same page, reporting back, knowing what they're supposed to do. And then also aware of like how much they're getting paid because, I want to provide value for people. Yes, we rely on a ton of volunteers and I'll always tell our volunteers coming into the BraveMaker culture, you can, we've coined the phrase, you can brave your way to a job here. You can eventually, keep showing up as a volunteer. Eventually you're going to get paid to do one of these things. And then I also encourage people to not stick around forever as a volunteer, but find ways to grow a monetizable skill here. Like that's what I want too, is I want people to build a resume, to link to the cape, to the coattails of BraveMaker, to help forward them and launch them into the passions and career and desires that they have for their future.
I love that you volunteer your way into, which is very different than what we do in the church. That's just that's where we're asking for money, and then we're asking people to pretty please volunteer to work the bake sale and the
Right.
and
Right.
take the offering and write all the but here, and then just the encouragement that don't be stuck in that rut. And stay in one place forever, make something else, make something for yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. So what's one thing that you wish somebody would have asked you, or what's one thing, you wish somebody would have told you, along the way, or you could tell yourself, looking back? What's that? I wish I would have known this.
Yeah. The asking part is so important when you're an entrepreneur, and especially as a person who's raising funds. I wish somebody would have taught me that you need to be able to be very specific and bold in all of your asks. Don't tiptoe into these meetings and say like, I maybe would you, I know, hey, I am here because I have something that's amazing. I believe in this so much. I've sacrificed my life. I gave up insurance, a house. I gave up all these things. I believe in it so passionately. I think if you were to believe in this too, you would see it change your life and you'd have exponential impact in our community. Can I count on you for $10,000? Like that's what I've had to get good at. And before it was kind of like praying, hoping something was going to happen. Nope. You got to ask. You got to ask a lot, and you got to be ready to hear a lot of people say no. A lot of people ghost you, not respond. And sometimes that first initial ghosting or crickets on an email doesn't mean no. You got to email again. You got to text them. You got to call them. You got to schedule an in-person meeting, because I have had one of my funders take almost a year and a half before I received a check. And I saw them and met them in person, and they were super excited. And then it was like nothing. And then I'm emailing and calling. So I wish somebody would have taught me that early on, because that has been a hard hill to climb. And you have so much, personal impact upon you, when really it's not about you. It's about the other person and how busy everybody is. So don't give up. Go, go, go. The people who are successful as entrepreneurs are the ones who do not give up and keep going. And don't stop until you hear them say no or I pass. Because a silence, that's not a no. I will make someone say, are you in? Are you able to, can I count on you to give? Or are you not able to support at this time? Are you not able to give anything? And that makes somebody have to decide, what do I want to say? Yes or no?
Yeah. No, I like that a lot. I mean, I think about what we do with giving in the
Mhm.
church. It kind of becomes that
Yeah,
I'm sorry I have to ask you for money again, but
that's right. That's right.
wow.
You don't need to apologize. We're giving people an awesome opportunity. And I'm not someone who's got a lot of money, but I remember when, youth group kids and former college students from my past would ask me, and I would kind of go, I don't got a lot, but I can give something. I would always give someone $25, right? So don't censor anybody in your life. Grandma, next door neighbor, everybody can give and tell them. Because I remember a woman who was kind of getting emotional, I'm so sorry, I felt embarrassed. I could only give so much. She'd set a dollar amount, and I said, that means a lot. I had a college student giving me $5 a month for 3 years. And she said, I gave up a coffee for you every week. And I love that. Yes, give what you can. And that says a lot about how you can support and believe in somebody like me, like any entrepreneur or, nonprofit leader.
Do you feel like this entrepreneurial spirit is that really um, where ministry is headed? I mean, we see what's happened in the church and churches closing, and then the midst of COVID and what COVID has done. I mean, having some of that, at least having part of that spirit, is that a requirement to be in ministry? Really?
Yeah, I don't know, Meg. I don't know. I don't know really what the future is holding. I definitely have some strong opinions about
Hmm.
where I think the church could go. And I would say, if the church doesn't start thinking about creating businesses and business models and or supporting entrepreneurs and young business leaders, I don't know. Maybe I'll say that a different way. If churches don't start decentering from Sundays, then they'll die. It's the churches that have preschools, the churches that have aftercare programs, the churches that have fitness opportunities, the churches that use their campus as a rental venue. Churches that say to the community, "Hey, school, you need a PTO meeting space. Use ours." Here's what my church does in Novato, California. They open it up to the local arts contemporary art museum, and they have art gallery exhibits every 3 months, and it's phenomenal. It's so great. Our church also hosts 7 different recovery meetings, and they can monetize that, right? Because they're renting.
Right.
So I think the church needs to recognize what they're going to do with their spaces, because the Sunday morning experience is, from what I see in many places, dwindling. But if you could say this building can be used and repurposed in other ways, I think, and you see that as an extension of what it means to be the church, I think, in my opinion, you're going to see some growth there.
Yeah. I think it's the less being married to the space that you're in, and um, seeing ministry as the things you do and the spaces you gather in, not necessarily just that one specific space.
Yep.
So really, if for somebody who thinks, okay, I love to do, I love to draw, or I love doing my blog, I love doing, is your advice to just go for it? What do you tell somebody that says that schedules one of these meetings with you? It says, Tony, I want to have a show on Mondays where I can get on there and I just talk to people. And I'm just a normal human, and yeah, I happen to be a pastor. Um, what do I do? What do you tell people?
I'd start with asking a lot of questions first and listen. Like, what are your ultimate goals, right? What do you hope to achieve? Why? Why do you want to do this? And if it's some of the responses that come back, if it's because I want to be famous, or no, because I want to make a lot of money, or because I, just have it within me, or because all of those things are, it's like a tree. You're going to figure out the why and the what and the how. Simon Sinek, who's a very well-known entrepreneur, he talks about the why behind the what. You got to start with the why. Like, why do you want to do it? What is this in you going to achieve? Is it something that you just can't live unless you do this? Great. Now, does it matter if you get a huge following? Does it matter if the Ministry Mondays live stream has 10 people on it and I don't know, I can't see. Does it matter? Well, good. Then okay, then just do it and be consistent. If it does something for you and you feel as if what it does in you is going to have an impact on others, and you sense a calling from God, even if you don't sense the heavens open and you hear the voice of God and she says whatever, you have to do this thing. You have to try, you have to experiment, and you have to be willing to fail. I'd say go for it. But again, that would come from after a long conversation of asking some really important questions. And I'm very much about setting goals and metrics and saying, why not? I like the idea of practicing or trying. The church doesn't use that experiment word a lot. Let's just practice. Let's just try it out. Let's experiment with this idea and see where it goes. And maybe we'll learn something along the way. And then we could adjust and try, or we can close the door or not.
And your why is just that this is what you love and where you felt your call was taking you? Is that, I mean,
Yeah,
if some, yeah.
my why is definitely because I love this and it satisfies my soul. But the why was also, I believe that stories can affect change. I believe that stories can, I'll say it, save lives. If someone could hear someone tell a story, my first feature film, I will be showing it on Tuesday night in Space for Grace, and when we go to Missouri. It's called Last Chance Charlene. I made Last Chance Charlene because I lost my grandmother to suicide, and I was a pastor at the time, and it wrecked me in a very deep way. A lot of people did not know how to handle or say the right thing. A lot of harmful things were said with good intentions, right? I made a film because it was within me to need to tell a story. But I also knew telling that story was going to help other people move forward in their own healing. So that's my why with BraveMaker. I want to do it. I love doing it, but I also see the power that it has to help, to save people's lives, to entertain them, to educate them, to give them an experience with the divine. And if they don't have any of those things, to just be a place where they feel seen and connected, to know that they're not alone.
Have you had those experiences yet where people have said, "Hey, I watched your film and it changed my life"?
Yeah, we have our film's only been out since April, but we have had some really great conversations with people, so much that we have created a resource, a workbook with some grief specialists that's available. So those of you who will be able to see my film in September, I will share it with you. You can even, check it out now. It's at bravemaker.com/last chance Charlene. That's the name of my film, but there's a PDF there. You can see all about the film. And we created with partnerships with two amazing grief specialists, Alana Yadav and Kim Hanlon. They created a workbook to help people process grief of all kinds, not just grief by death to suicide or any death, but grief of a divorce, grief of sending your kids off to college, grief of disappointment for a job that you hope to get that you wouldn't. And, grief is a large part of our life. So if I could make a film that could help someone else process what's going on in my life, then I feel really successful. So a lot of our films are going to offer these type of resources. Thank you for putting it on the screen. bravemaker.com/last chance Charlene.
Yeah. I think that's very, very important. And someday I'll tell all my story, but it speaks to me.
Well, make sure
As
you come and see it on. I think it's was it September 20th, Tuesday night. Let
Yeah,
me double.
I'll have to bring tissues. I'm sure.
Yeah, please.
It'll be one of those. My mom is one that struggles with mental health issues, so things like that um, are
They're real.
yeah they are, and I can't articulate articulate
Mhm.
how important
Yep.
um, really things having those things are to people, um, because I'm sure that you are changing lives. Um,
Thank you.
the one question I want to ask you is the one that I ask everybody, is my joy question. So in all that you do, you say you still do the pastor things, you have other, what what brings you joy?
Hmm. I'm a husband and a father, and I could get emotional just thinking about this, but just
Mm,
taking time because life is busy, it's full. I just started volunteering at my kids' school as the crossing guard because they didn't have one. The school was so shorthanded, and I honestly did it reluctantly. But finding joy in the sacrifice of saying no to other things I want to do in order to benefit people around me, like my kids, like my wife, it definitely brings me joy. Uh, we say in our house all the time, like, take it in, just take it in. Because we're always, getting out the door this morning to even get here to my office was just so chaotic. This is our third week of school. We're still getting, carpools figured out. And it's a lot. I'm tired. But there's such joy in that sometimes when you just stop. I look at my kids walking to school. I getting to hug them in the crosswalk. It's those little beautiful moments that can bring me such satisfaction. Not walking on a red carpet, not speaking in a pulpit and getting applause afterwards. It's those little ones, those little moments that nobody really sees but you, and cherishing them. Kind of like what we heard of Mary, right? She cherished all those things in her heart, and that brings me joy.
Oh, I get that. I get
Mhm.
that. I am so grateful to you for
Thanks, Meg.
giving your time, for meeting with me, for sharing part of your story. I encourage those who are watching to, if they haven't already, come join us, sign up, come to Space for Grace, and meet Tony, and be a part of this. It's going to be great. Um, if you're not able to join us, get, connect with Tony. You can go to BraveMaker.com, and I still have the last chance for a link because I think that's really important, guys. Go check that out. But support BraveMaker at BraveMaker.com. Um, and I'll say thank you to ABHMS for letting me do this.
Mm.
Just giving me the opportunity to fall over my words and but talk to some really great people about the things that they are doing in their life. These are available on Facebook, at ABHMS, and at Judson Press, and also somewhere in YouTube land for ABHMS. So and we're here every Monday. Um, and again, to my guest today, Tony Gapastione, um, I say thank you so
Mhm.
much.
Thanks, Meg. Yeah, this is good. I like talking and having someone ask good questions. I always say, like, I don't have all the answers, so I can just do my best to respond to the questions that come to me. So thank you for asking really powerful, poignant questions. And I'm very active on social media. So if anybody wants to reach out, find me. Our Instagram handle is BraveMaker.org, O-R-G. You can find me at Tony Gapastione or Tony at BraveMaker.com. I'm happy to connect with anybody. And if you have any students that want to learn about filmmaking and storytelling, we do have internships, and we have people from Austin, Texas, Grand Rapids, Michigan. Love to get some more East Coasters because the world is digital, so we can help support you and your students in
Right.
their desires, no matter where they are. It's a beautiful thing. So thank you, Meg, for hosting.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for doing this. So thank you everybody for watching.